And we're live. Great to be back again. My name's Russ, and I'm joined today by Erica and Kim. Erica and Kim, thanks for joining us today. How is your summer going, Kim? Have you found a way to enjoy summer, given all the interesting restrictions that are on us today?
Yeah, we finally got some nice summer weather up here in Boston, so I'm just getting outside as much as I possibly can. I feel like it's safe to social distance at the beach.
That's right. That feels good. How about you, Erica? Are you getting outside at all?
Yeah, I'm actually down in the Nashville area, and we're, learning to navigate the social distancing thing, but really enjoying kind of going back to our roots and, having a summer like I had growing up, playing in the backyard, bikes, roller skates. I'm not even sure if people know what roller skates are anymore, but we're having a great time. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, roller skates are kind of like those skates they had before they put all the wheels in a row, right?
Right.
They were side by side. Right? Yeah, but we're having a great summer here too. I got in a little camping early in the season. It's pretty easy to social distance in the woods, so that's nice. And now we're going through my oldest daughter's graduating from high school, so we're going through the whole prepping for college thing. So, and that's exciting to watch all the poor seniors go through that stuff, but we're getting there. So, I wanted to ask you guys, we've been thinking a lot. It's summertime's here, and a lot of organizations are taking a look at this opportunity to kind of think about, as you work through all the challenges, what are we doing with our comp structures? How are we handling these sorts of things? And we're seeing a lot of an uptick in a type of structure called job range structures, right? But I want to ask both of you, before we even get into like what might the differences between job ranges and grade-based structures might be and why you might choose the two. My real question for you guys is, why do companies even use structures? Like, we do have a lot of HR generalists listen to the show, so I know all the comp folks are going to laugh at me and say, come on, Russ, we all know what that is. But Kim, do you want to share, like, what are some of the reasons you see a lot of orgs sort of tackle this concept of structures?
Sure. I think when you're asking yourself, why should I have a structure? I think it's helpful to think about what could go wrong if you don't have a structure. The point of the structure is to have a framework within which you make consistent pay administration decisions. And without that framework in place, the decisions are going to be made, really on an ad hoc basis. When I talk to clients who are moving into a structure for the very first time, they describe it as the wild, wild west. You have pay decisions that are being made by individual managers. They're pricing employees and not jobs. And you really just lose control over your compensation programs if you don't have a decision-making mechanism in place.
Yeah, nice. So, Erica, is it really all about ensuring pay equity and consistency? Is that what you see?
Absolutely. And, just to reiterate what Kim said, the guardrails that we put out there so that people feel equipped and empowered to make smart decisions with regard to their employees' pay. And, keeping those employees motivated and feeling confident in your decisions as a manager is, I think, one of the things we all lose a little sleep over. So I think that they just add a tremendous amount of value there and help keep everybody on track with those extra things like the compliance and the labor rules and, internal equity and all that great stuff.
Yeah. And does it give you sort of, Kim, maybe you think, do you think about it as sort of a way to make it easier to communicate with your leadership team and help with transparency as well?
I definitely think it helps with the leadership team. I think that it's nice to demonstrate that there's a process behind your compensation decisions. As we're going to talk about, a lot of times the structure is market data based. And I think that leadership likes to see that it's a data-driven process, that your numbers aren't just made up, that you have some backing, some scientific-ish backing behind the numbers. And as for employee transparency, I think that kind of varies. I think a lot of that depends on the structure itself and how mature your HR department and management team are in communicating the concepts of the structure. But I definitely think that it's easier to do when you have something that you can speak to than when you don't.
Got it. And so as you think about trying to build a structure in your organization, right? So you're trying to make everyone understand how we're going to do this. You're trying to make everyone understand that there's a rhyme and reason. What I think is really compelling about structures is it brings together so many different aspects of what comp folks do every day, right? It brings a market pricing in with what you guys pay your average comp is for your employees. It shows you where they kind of all come together. It shows you where you might have issues. It kind of gives you a framework for identifying calls to action, right? It brings all that together. But what's sort of interesting is, and it depends who you talk to, there's sort of a movement now in comp to sort of, I don't want to say introduce, it's more like revive job-based ranges. So there's kind of two different traditional kinds of structures, right? There's actually several, a bunch. But there's kind of two sort of core go-to styles, I would guess, that I'd love to talk a little bit about. One is the grade-based structures, and the other is what they call job-based ranges or job-based structures. Maybe, Erica, can you kind of give us, since job-based ranges are kind of the new hotness, but if you've been around long enough, maybe they're not hot. maybe they're just the old guy. What's old is new again. But Erica, can you kind of give us like, what's up with the job-based range structure? What does that look like? What does that really mean?
So I think that really job-based ranges is another attempt of comp practitioners to really get, a better feel for what's going on with hot jobs and hot markets, and really provide more guidance and precision with regard to pay for those kinds of jobs. So your job-based ranges are really trying to give a more specific range, whether that be for base salary or target total compensation or any other kind of comp element that really hones in on a specific job, or even more, a specific job within a specific target market area. So a specific location or region or zone. So I think it's something that we're doing to really hone in and provide more detailed guidance with more precision on these hot jobs that we're seeing out there.
Got it. So you're thinking like a job-based range really is like each element of the structure, each object in the structure, if you will, is a job, right? And you're looking at how that's going to fall against market, and that's going to build out your graph, your structure, if you will, of how you expect it to progress as you move from your lower paying jobs to your higher paying jobs. Now, Kim, how does that differ from a grade-based structure? How do you think about a grade-based structure?
So in a grade-based structure, your jobs are grouped together. So instead of looking at every job individually, you're going to cluster jobs that are similar based on some job valuation exercise, whether that's market pricing or job content based. And every grade is given a minimum, a midpoint, and a maximum. Not every job, every grade. And so all of the jobs that are in the same grade are working under those same parameters, the same minimum, same midpoint, same maximum.
And why do people typically group? Do they group their jobs together in these grades, Kim? Is it because they want to be able to, there's a lot of common jobs that share a lot of the same sorts of things, so it's easier just to move them together? Or is it more, it's harder to market price that many different jobs, so maybe it's easier to kind of market price a grade? Like, what is the value? Why do people roll those all up like that?
So I think there are a couple of reasons. The first is that in a grade-based structure, you're right, you don't have to market price all of your jobs. You don't need to have a distinct market value for every single job. And so that's one benefit. But really, the purpose of grouping the jobs together is that when you've done so, your structure will then reflect really the intersection of the external market and the internal valuation of the job. So it's a way of accounting for both the competitive labor value of the job and also how the job is perceived inside of your organization.
Got it. That sounds really cool. So why do folks... So Erica, why do you think folks lean towards the job base? Not lean, lean's the wrong term, because both I don't want to, it's kind of like a religious debate, right? Some folks will vehemently and passionately explain why grade-based structures are ideal. And some folks will explain why job-based structure is ideal. The reality of what we're starting to see is that a lot of our clients, right, Erica, are moving to both. They have some job families that are in grade, and they have some job families that are maybe in job-based ranges. Why are some folks sort of picking that? You kind of hinted at maybe it's easier for faster moving jobs. Why is that? What's the perception there?
I think that we're seeing a resurgence in this particular style because we're trying to figure out how to better align with the speed of business right now. Different jobs are, developing a new level of importance out there. I'm certain we're going to see that happening with, the current climate with COVID and everything. Different jobs are going to become our hot jobs. And this allows us to really tailor things at the job level rather than at that broader grade level. I think the grades are still always going to be very important, but this just gives us a little bit more flexibility there to operate on a job-by-job basis where needed.
So it sounds like the job-based ranges, the strength is you can get down to that really granular level at the job. Of course, one of the weaknesses now you got to price every single job, and you don't have that nice roll-up that Kim described. Kim, is the primary weakness in grade-based structures sort of this idea that, well, when you have faster-moving jobs, what sort of starts to happen to a grade-based structure when you have that challenge?
Yeah, I think one of the weaknesses of the grade-based structure is that it's not going to be as easily responsive to changes in the market like that. Because you've got your jobs graded together, you can, but it's not as easy to just move one job in response to a market fluctuation. You really have to think about how that impacts every other job that's in the structure. How does that change? Do you need to move any other jobs along with it? Are you going to cause compression if you move one job and not another? So the grade-based structures really just aren't as responsive to nuances in the marketplace as the job-based ranges are.
Got it. And that's when you see when you have certain job families, and this is sort of something we're seeing with clients, right? Is that you have a job family like technology, where some of those jobs are really changing on sometimes a quarterly basis in terms of comp. Putting them in a traditional grade can be very challenging. And now as we move through, all the changes in the market today, where is everything going to shake out, and is everything going to fit nice and neatly back into your grades? And so we might get new data over the course of the summer and into the end of the year that there may be other job families after all this is over that might benefit from going to that sort of job-based range approach, right? Let me ask you guys this. So I've heard of other types of structures, right? Employee and broadband or other terms that go around. What are those about? And do we see that a lot with our clients, or is most everybody either in this grade or job situation? Eric, have you seen anything with the employee or broadband much?
I think there are still a large number of companies that are still using broader ranges. I haven't heard the term broadband used as far as new structures being put in place at the same level as I used to hear it. But they're definitely still out there, and I think that they do still serve a purpose. They allow for a huge amount of flexibility for organizations and business leaders to make the decisions they need to make. So if you're very comfortable with that executive leadership team and comp decision makers out there doing what they got to do, those broad ranges for a smaller comp team might be an excellent fit.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So Kim, when we're doing these consultative offerings, right? So we have clients call us up and they're like, hey, can you help us out, build out our structures? How do you ever get asked, like, should we set up grade-based structures or job range structures? Do you, how do you kind of work with the clients? How do they decide which way to go? Do they have a predisposed sort of thought process around it? Or do you kind of walk them through some sort of, decision tree making process to kind of says, well, maybe if you're thinking this way, maybe you should be leaning towards grade jobs. And if you're thinking this way, you should be leaning towards grades.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think there's a one size fits all answer. So what works for one organization might not work for the other. So I do have companies who come to me and think, oh, we're excited to build a broadbanded structure because they think that's the right choice for them, and it's not. So usually what I like to do is I try to get at what the company is looking to achieve with the structure. And I like to think about where they're coming from and where they're going to. What level of transparency has existed in your organization to date? Because you might find that a job-based range is a little bit easier to communicate to your organization. So if you're looking to increase transparency, maybe that's a good option for you. But other things you need to think about are, how much data do we have to support the development of the structure? As we talked about a little bit earlier, the job-based range does require you to market price your jobs. All of your jobs need to have a market value associated with it. And so if you work in a company where you have a lot of really hard to benchmark jobs, a lot of really unique positions, a job-based range might be a little bit more difficult to pull off. On the flip side, a grade-based structure helps, I think, a lot of times promote a little bit more internal equity across the organization. And so if that's something that you're hoping to accomplish, then a more, I don't want to say traditional, but a more typical grade-based structure might be the right choice for you.
Great. And Eric, I know you've helped a lot of folks set up the job-based ranges and walk through that sort of process. What are some of the pitfalls there? I mean, is it really about making sure you have the right data to get together and make this happen? Is it a lot more work than maybe sometimes people expect? Or is it always just go completely smoothly and everybody's just happy very quickly?
Oh, I think everybody hopes it will always go completely smoothly. But job-based ranges does require a lot of resources. Like Kim said, it is a data-heavy setup, so you're going to have a substantial amount of market data at your disposal to be able to price a large volume of your jobs. If you're using it for specific jobs, I think you can kind of skirt away from that. But you're also going to have the man hours to be able to support that and manage it and navigate the communication of changes. You know, it's always a good news story when the market data goes up, ranges will go up. Mm-hmm. But what about those jobs that are kind of coming off of that hot job track? You know, those might stay static for a few years or even dip a little bit lower as perhaps new technology replaces those particular positions. So I'd say one of the big things to keep in mind is, have an eye for that level of transparency for those less desirable conversations, because you can't all of a sudden pull the curtain very quickly if the story is a little harder to present just because the market data dipped for a specific job. So have an eye for that, and make sure that you consider those situations as you're progressing with your decision.
Yeah, so it sounds like you might think that the job-based range is sort of the idealized solution, but as you both have pointed out, it also sounds like it can be a lot of work. And you're really going to, whichever approach you choose, right, you're going to need to have good leadership buy-in, because either setting up a structure, whether it's great or job-based, is going to take a lot of work as well. Kim, do you have any tips for like sort of the pitch to leadership? Like, how do you kind of sell them on this idea? Yeah, we're going to need to invest a little bit in either systems or data or time or all the above to sort of build out the structure process. And we talked about it a little in the beginning, but kind of what would be like sort of the 2 or 3 takeaways of like, here's how you can kind of get people excited about going through the structure project.
Yeah, I think, to take it back to where we started, what can go wrong if you don't have a structure, regardless of the type? And I think leadership really will understand the pitfalls of what can go wrong. You can expose yourself to equity violations, you can expose yourself to labor wage violations. But really, I think explaining that it's a best practice and it's a common practice. Most companies have some form of structure put in place. And yes, there's a bit of lift at the beginning and then you have to maintain it going forward. But it really, I think, helps your organization work more efficiently. It helps you reward your employees more effectively. And I think that employees like to know that there's some thought put into the pay that they're given, that there's an approach to making decisions that's consistent and fair across the organization.
Yep. And I think when you get exactly where you're going, when you get to pay equity, whether it's based on ethnicity or gender, when you get to those places, something like a structure really helps you make that case for sure. Erica, and you brought this point up too, right? When we're talking about making the job-based ranges, how challenging it can be to get the data and get all those jobs accurately priced. And then we also talked about how, having a structure with certain fast-moving job families can be very challenging. So we're starting to see a lot of clients take this sort of hybrid approach where some of their job families are job-based and some of those job families are grade-based. Have you worked with clients that have kind of made these decisions before, and how do they sort of tackle that? Is it really just about job speed, and so I'm going to go job-based? Is it how fast they move in the market, or are there other things to consider?
I think that there's a collection of things that you consider whenever you're making a decision on your structure. The speed with which your jobs are moving is certainly going to be a big factor. If you're, let's say, a technology organization where you're continuously innovating and adopting, different technology that requires that new programming language, you're likely more inclined to move towards something like job-based ranges. But if you could also be in an industry that doesn't necessarily have that same speed of innovation. Some jobs or organizations that work in more retail sectors or perhaps manufacturing sectors, more operational kinds of jobs, may feel that, they have a pretty stable, stable changes being applied to their pay year over year and don't really see the need there. I think other things to consider, when it comes to the job-based ranges is also, that really helps you align with the budgetary constraints for your organization. So it might be something that your partners in the finance department or budget department are really eager to see as well, because that helps them align from that budgetary perspective. And perhaps the guidance can, manage things effectively for those teams as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you both brought this up a little bit to get that seat at the table. We talk about this a lot, right? How does compensation just become sort of a part of the leadership team at your organization? How do people think about comp the way they think about other functions? And I think a lot of it has to do, if you can come to leadership with a clearly defined approach, clearly defined structures, you can have a much more interesting conversation with leadership and kind of help them make some of those big decisions about which jobs do we have to really watch for, because there's a lot of rapid change happening. Which jobs do we want a clear structure around to protect us from pay equity issues and those kinds of things. I like to always, whenever we have guests on the show, I love to ask about predictions. And so we've been talking a little bit about two very different kinds of structure approaches. And as you mentioned, a lot of organizations are sort of tackling either one or the other, depending on the job family. But do you think, and for those who've been around comp a long time, obviously we all know that job-based ranges were kind of, certain industries have been around for a long time, like 60s and 70s, and then they kind of went away and grades became the thing, and now it sounds like job-based ranges are kind of making a comeback. So let me ask you guys this, and Kim, we'll start with you. Did you care to make a prediction? Will there ever be a single form of structure, either some kind of new hybrid that is a blend of the two? Will people eventually go all grade and just this job-based range thing is a fad? Or we all go job-based ranges and grades will be a thing of the past, or something different? What do you think, Kim? And then Erica, get ready. I'm going to ask you the same question.
I don't think, and you know what, I hope that we don't have one overarching structure type that everyone adopts. I think that just as the same structure doesn't work for every organization, the same structure doesn't work for every set of jobs. Like Erica said, there are certain parts of the labor market that lend themselves to job-based ranges, and I think there are parts that lend themselves to a grade-based structure. So my guess is we'll see a little bit of a hybrid approach where you have some jobs in a grade-based structure and some jobs in a job-based range within a single organization.
Great. What do you think, Erica?
Yeah, I have a tendency to really see a blend happening just across compensation in general and within organizations themselves. You might want to do something specific for your non-exempt population, perhaps continue on with that grade-based approach. And then perhaps for your IT and engineering, try out job-based ranges for those particular kinds of roles. And then, maybe as you move into those management and executive levels, maybe we even blend it with a little bit of broadbanding to make sure you've got the flexibility there. So I think it really wouldn't surprise me to see more and more companies having different approaches, for their different the different segments of their population.
Yeah, I agree. I think the hybrid is where we're going to I think there's always going to be these two different approaches. And I think the value for the two are always going to be there. What's going to be fascinating to watch is as technology improves and it becomes more and more less aspirational to have most, or if not all of your jobs market priced, why couldn't we get to a place where I can have grades, but I can see where the jobs who are, real-time market price, let's say, in a future world that's really neat, and see where they fall against the grade and see how, and kind of give me calls to action on where I need to inform my grade changes, which I can imagine eventually we get to, which kind of goes back to what you're both kind of saying as a hybrid approach where you need both and maybe the two work together to give us all the benefits we were describing today. Well, Erica and Kim, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you everyone for listening. If you have any questions, please reach out, email us at coffee@payfactors.com. we'll get back to you guys with any answers we can. And thanks again, and we'll talk to you guys again soon. Comp and Coffee is a Pay Factors production dedicated to the compensation community. We welcome your feedback. Send email to coffee@payfactors.com, tweet us at PayFactors, or share your thoughts in our Pay Factors community tile. Until next time, keep your coffee hot and your data fresh.